Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Data Standard Audio Experience. I'm here today with Chester Ismay, the Director of Data Science Education at Flatiron School. And today we're going to be speaking about student challenges in the data science world. So welcome to the show, Chester. It's such a pleasure to have you today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Catherine.
Yeah, and I'm so excited to just dive deeper into just your perspective on kind of the dynamics between what students are learning right now and how different that might be in industry today. So let's just get started. Could you tell us more about your background and introduce yourself?
Sure. So hi there, everybody listening. As Catherine mentioned, I'm Director of Data Science Education at Flatiron School. I'm based in Portland, Oregon, and I always like to start with just some fun facts when doing introductions. So here are two that come to mind for me. So number one, I've never met another person named Chester, though I do often hear about pets that people have had named Chester, or maybe sometimes a distant older relative named Chester. That happens all the time. Not quite sure how I feel about that, but yeah, it's nice and fun to kind of have a unique name. The second one, I have visited all 50 US states, and I have to be a little careful there in clarifying what I mean by actually visiting a state. So what I've decided on is that I have either eaten a meal or I have slept at least one night in each of the 50 states. So there are some states I probably will never go back to again, but there are others I would be happy to go to again. But yeah, all 50 states based on that criteria. Let's see, a little bit of background on me in terms of my data background. I've been in education pretty much since 2010. That's when I went back to school to work on my PhD in statistics. And after that, I worked as an academic professor, data science and statistics for a few years. And then I shifted to online education. And most recently, I've been doing corporate training prior to my director role at Flatiron School. And I've long worked in R. I've co-authored an introductory data science textbook using R, as well as being the author of a few R packages. And then the last few years, I have been doing more and more in Python.
Yeah, no, that's so great. And it's so fun that you started off the conversation with just some fun facts about yourself also. So that's great to hear. And were there any states that kind of stood out as some of your favorites?
Hawaii is an easy choice. Oregon and the West Coast is also great to me. I finished the 50th state was Maine, so I kind of wrapped up in Portland, Maine. So I did like a little Northeast journey because I had like 7 states remaining. I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Western South Dakota. So like a lot of the states that people save until the very end, I got like early on in childhood, like South Dakota, North Dakota, folks that don't even know that those are 2 different states. But yeah, I've done a lot of traveling and exploring kind of all of the US. Alaska too. Yeah, Alaska and Hawaii are my 2 favorites for sure.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And just kind of jumping into more of the data related questions now, I wanted to ask you, so what are some major challenges that you've seen with framing data science problems, since there's a lot of different problems that the data science field, they're always trying to just solve. So from your perspective, what have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, certainly data science can work towards solving so many of the world's problems. I think one of the biggest challenges in framing comes in really just understanding what data you actually have access to and going about solving that problem. And that's often sometimes a hard thing to realize and understand. Like, I just assume that I have the data to be able to solve this problem, but kind of thinking a little bit going forward, am I actually going to have the data to be able to solve that particular problem? So that can be, do you actually have access to the database that collects that information? It could also be, do you have the ability to track whatever that target is that you want to be able to try to predict going forward too? So there's a couple different things there to think about. There's also limitations, I think, in the granularity of the data. That impacts also what types of problems you might be able to solve. If you're looking to make something like daily projections of sales using the data that you've collected, but you only have monthly or weekly data, that's all obviously also going to be a much harder, more difficult problem for you to be able to solve. And also going in the opposite direction can be a problem. If you have data coming in every millisecond, that's wonderful, but that's also going to create just huge amounts of data that could cause some computational complexity. Going to be a little bit more challenging to be able to solve that particular problem as well. The last aspect that I think definitely something that can be a challenge is just in terms of framing problems is having the subject matter expertise needed to actually understand both the problem, wherever that sits with the stakeholders that you have, as well as how that data could actually be used to solve that problem. So do the variables actually have names that are coherent? Do you have a data dictionary that makes sense? Oftentimes it just takes some time to accumulate the knowledge necessary to solve those problems.
Yeah, definitely. Great perspective there. And in addition to that, what are some aspects of data science that students, that you've seen that students maybe should focus more on? And is there anything that you want to comment on, especially with the data collection process?
Yeah, so I think that ties nicely back to the previous question there. So really many of the people I know that work in the data science industry have been successful because of their backgrounds in another field. So this is a little bit weird that I'm saying, oh, data scientists, that's a great way to go, but you should probably think about if you have a background in something else or you worked in some other field. I think that's something I would really try to focus on data science. People that are just getting started in data science, think about ways that you can tie that back to whatever your backgrounds were previously. This is also something that we do right now with our Flatiron School students. They often introduce themselves as something like, my name is Chester and my background is in mathematics and statistics. So whatever that background is in, if their sociology background, and they say that, it's a nice way to differentiate themselves. So data collection, I can definitely get there too in a little bit, but I think having people think about how they can tie their expertise in with data is ultimately what they're going to have to be doing when they go into the industry too. So I think being able to frame that as much as possible is really a great way to go. And yeah, just being able to tie in that knowledge of a particular field along with the data science and machine learning expertise, I think really sets a person apart if they are going and applying to a new job. So that's definitely something that the first thing I would focus on. And maybe I'm going to answer the opposite question. I would pull back on trying to be a deep learning expert or knowing about all of the fanciest deep learning algorithms. There's time to learn all of that, but I think just showing your expertise and showing how that ties into data is the biggest thing for me. Another thing to focus on, I encourage students to do and work on would be getting data to a form where a simple analysis or a visualization makes sense. So I would just continually work on this, repeatedly looking at new data, trying to figure out, is there something I could do with this data to actually get a meaningful insight out of it? I know something that's worked well for me in the past, the R for Data Science online learning community on Twitter has a weekly data set. It's released every Tuesday or every Monday. And there's a Tidy Tuesday hashtag that comes along with that. So if I have some free time in a given week, I'll just go see what that data set is, pull that down into R or Python and see what kind of insights I can get from that. Oftentimes it's a data set that I have known nothing about. I have no clue what's going on, but just gaining some insights from that has gone a long way for me in just improving my skills. The last thing I'll say here is working with messier data sets. So sometimes maybe we frame data science problems as being like, oh, here's tabular data in a nice spreadsheet format, and then let's do some fancy analysis with it. Almost always the harder part of actually pulling down that data, getting it into a nice table format is just often overlooked. And then when people go get data science jobs, they're like, why am I doing all this data cleaning? I want to be doing modeling. So I think, pulling down like a JSON file from an API like Yelp and being able to work with all of that crazy nesting and trying to pull out different things to get into a data frame, that's definitely another thing I would try to focus on, just working with kind of messy, weird data sets.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a great point. It's just the data cleaning side. I heard it's a big portion of the data scientist job, and I think a lot of people going into learning about this field, they don't always know that. They think it's always about building these crazy, fun, complex models, but I think realistically, it's only about 20% or so of the data science job from what I've heard. But yeah, definitely great insight there. And on top of that, have you seen any other big challenge gaps that you've seen between students and industry today?
Yeah, that's also a good question. I think, yeah, just like we were saying, students see data science as like, oh, I get to do everyday fancy algorithms. I get to do hyperparameter tuning and deep learning networks and neural networks, all this fancy stuff, time series, just all of these fancy metrics. And it is important, and modeling is important. I'm not going to completely say you should not learn anything about deep learning. But I think for many industries, to me, really the real value comes in being able to communicate the key findings of the data science process. that is definitely lacking right now. Like people being able to take a very complex topic, communicate it clearly to a variety of different stakeholders, really just focusing on data visualization, making sure that the graphic is pulling out exactly what you want to portray, whatever the most important things of the analysis are, having some summary tables that go along with that, just being able to communicate very clearly, not using fancy jargon, just going about that way. I think that's maybe the biggest gap I'm seeing right now is people are great at doing fancy algorithms and getting analysis out there, but actually talking through this is why the analysis worked in the ways that it did. I think that's something just to continually work on and improve communication via written and presentations as well, verbally. Yeah, and I think just being able to interpret the results of a model, that should be a bigger role in terms of what people do. So I see Jupyter notebooks on GitHub all the time that somebody fit this model, they got these results out, and then it just stopped there. Where like you're only getting started, like you ran the code, but you still got to interpret those. You got to do the things that the machine can't do, and that's interpreting those results and talking about the findings of those results too. Yeah, so I think industry is really looking for data communicators with technical skills and also a willingness to learn and to adapt quickly. If you can do that, then you can go learn about the deep learning aspects whenever you need to. But those skills of communication will come through in the interview. They'll also come through in your day-to-day, almost certainly. Even if you don't even continue into data science, being able to communicate your findings, whatever you decide to do, is just a super, super valuable skill.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to also talk to you about just final advice that you have for students. Do you have any final advice that are, just for students that are, maybe they want to go into a data science field or a field that's similarly to yours?
Yeah, it's almost cliche at this point, but building your network is the number one thing I would recommend. And how you actually do that, I would start with figuring out what are the things you like most about data science and machine learning. And then finding kind of that subgroup, that community that can further support you in that focus to kind of keep that passion alive. So like an example, maybe you're interested in documentation and unit testing and all of that goes along the software engineering aspect of data science. So there are communities like Write the Docs. They have Slack groups available. They can help you further explore this, answer some of your questions about that subdiscipline, and also help you see what jobs are available if you want to go down that path. Because the data science job market, there's so many different titles, there's so many different things to go and explore. So try to find that subgroup that can help you with that. If you want to work with data more closely, you're certainly going to be able to work in SQL, but if that's really what you like, you want to do more SQL work, then there are some introductory data engineering positions and things like that that you could go and get some experience with. And there's tons of resources available for joining data sets, joining tables together. And that's also going to assist you with modeling. So if you want to improve your modeling, pulling in external data sets can improve performance of models. And SQL is often overlooked, I think, in my experience of just looking at the backgrounds of folks that are applying for jobs. And I think I talked about this a little bit already. Focus on finding data projects that you are passionate about. And this might even just include volunteering to help a nonprofit work with their data. Maybe you want to analyze sports data. Maybe you want to look at the latest Nintendo Switch game, really just wherever your passions lie. That's going to help you continually get practice with data. And in my experience, you're really going to learn to appreciate the data field really through those passions.
Yeah, and I think those are some great examples as well for just things that different people can kind of look at for projects if they want to just have more experience with hands-on experience with data. And I wanted to say thank you so much, Chester, for joining me today. It was so great to have you on the podcast. At the Data Standard, we're trying to build a community where everyone can just come together and have a place where they can network and collaborate with each other. So is there anything that we can help you do?
Yeah, so I think as I continue my journey towards Python being my third language, after English and R, I know a little bit of Spanish too, but English and R are really my first two languages. Yeah, what resources have worked best for all of you transitioning from one language to another? What nuances of Python have most annoyed you? How did you get through them? So I'd love to see and learn more about that. In terms of collaboration, I have worked for, geez, it's like 4 or 5 years now on an R package called Thesis Down. And this is a way for students working on their final collegiate project, usually a master's or PhD level thesis. And it's a way for them to do all of that in R Markdown. So a nice kind of reproducible format for their theses to help out with that, so that they're not doing everything in Microsoft Word or something like that. So anybody that has LaTeX experience, I have no idea if that is still really a thing, but most theses are written with a template in LaTeX. So if people have LaTeX experience, I would love some assistance in helping me get that to CRAN so that students can more quickly get access to the Thesis Down package. So that's one kind of collaboration request. In my time, I don't have a ton of time available to be able to get that to a really good spot, but I'd love to get some assistance there if folks have it. So really just search for Thesis Down on GitHub. You'll find the repo and you can reach out to me there.
Yeah, perfect. And is there anywhere else that they can reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. I think just searching for Chester Ismay, since we talked about that's not a very common name. I don't know of any other Chester Ismays for sure. You will see a picture of me. I have a trimmed down version of my beard, kind of similar to what I have now. I did have a year-long beard that I grew from March 2020 to March 21. I don't think I have any photos of that online, but you'll see a man with a beard and a short haircut. That's me. I'm reasonably active on Twitter. My Twitter handle is old_man_Chester, which is a bit of a play on the fact that, you know, people tend to have an older age that go along with my name. So I just owned it, and in 50 years it'll actually make sense when I'm old man there. The last maybe shameless plug, the textbook I talked about co-authoring in R is also available for free. Modern Dive, MODERNDIVE.com. It's freely available there. It's also published as a printed text from CRC Press.
All right, perfect. And I wanted to say thank you so much, Chester, for joining us today. To our audience, for more information on the data standard, you can find us at www.datastandard.io, as well as on our LinkedIn and YouTube channel. And thank you so much, Chester, for joining me today. It was so great to hear more about your experiences and just all the different things that you're kind of working with, especially with students' advice. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me, Catherine.